So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the evening session, and I'm glad to call Nikolos Vasilopoulos and Ioannis Vitaliotis of the Academy of Athens. We are going to talk about the Church of Panagia του Γιαλού in Gavrio, island of Andros, and the Maronites, some evidence from architecture and archival materials.
To Γάλλου. Of
Γάλλου.
the French, it was a nickname. Hello, I thank you very much. I thank you very much the committee for the approval of our communication. I'm going also to speak on behalf of Mr. Nikos Vasilopoulos, who is an architect, and he has also a master in architecture, and he's an independent researcher, a specialist in medieval architecture of Andros. So I have to start with the. Now we will come back to from 19th, early 20th century to medieval period, and from Balkans to Cyclades islands, approximately 1 kilometer north of the port of Gavrio, at the point where the plain ends, stands the old church of the Virgin, known as Panagia του Γάλλου, from the nickname of a previous owner, Gallos, of the adjacent plot. The church is built next to a stream and a fountain that used to have abundant water. That morphologically distinct structure had not until now attracted scholarly attention. However, the amateur historian Dimitrios Paschalis, in his History of Andros, published in 1926, describes the church as Byzantine. In 2020, the removal of interior plaster work, initiated by the parish priest of Gavrio, Father Kalinikos Chousis, revealed the underlying masonry, prompting further investigation of the monument. The building has undergone significant modifications in the past, though the precise chronology of these interventions remains unclear. It is likely that multiple phases of repair occurred. The western exterior wall, in its current form, you see here the western wall, has been also largely rebuilt. It still retains the plaster coatings of the 1990s. Today, the plan of the church resembles an inverted T, resulting in a disproportionately wide facade in its current form. You see, the facade is too much wide in comparison to the length of the church. The aerial photographs clearly indicate that the structure originally extended farther westwards. I mean, this place was normally the church extended here towards west. The width of the almost semicircular sanctuary here, arc, equals that of the aisle. So it's, I mean, the whole aisle ends to the apse. The holy altar is attached to the apse. Here is the altar, so there is no corridor, and there is no prothesis niche. No corridor, no prothesis. Inside the church, the free space there is very limited. The ground plan incorporates two massive piers. So I have to here the piers, composed of two distinct construction layers. The piers support two arches here, one of them that span towards the opposite walls of the nave, west of the sanctuary. Then the first one, there is another one that it's not visible here. The piers were likely designed to bear substantial loads, such as those from a vaulted roof that does not exist, or even a dome at the intersection of the two aisles. Today, however, the church features a flat corbelled roof. Here it's a corbelled roof, composed of large schist slabs, a result of the last major restoration phase, probably after 16th century. The corbelled arch system, known as bundulumnia in local dialect, is a characteristic feature of early modern traditional architecture on Andros, both secular and religious. Masonry analysis. During the initial building phase of the church, cornerstones were employed only sporadically. I mean, cornerstones at the corners to support the upper structure. This is a striking deviation from the island's established construction practices. The construction primarily employs indigenous schist, the main building stone of Andros. Here you can see the schist, broadly employed since antiquity. The schist is notably combined with limestone blocks. Here you can see the limestone blocks, particularly in the vaulting system, creating thus a striking material juxtaposition, limestone and schist. The limestone may originally be from northern Andros, although we cannot exclude its transportation from here. We have some limestone. The church is here, though we cannot exclude the transportation of blocks from another islands. We cannot rule it. It's a possibility that cannot be ruled out, cannot be excluded. The walls of the Panagia contain also some ancient marble spolia and even baked bricks. Let us add that the use of baked bricks in construction is exceptionally rare in the traditional architecture of Andros. The antal frontal, here is spolium, and now the altar frontal, incorporates an early Christian marble spolium curved with a cross, highlighting the ritual function of the altar, of the construction. Overall, the examination of the masonry of the Panagia Tougalou indicates that it was built using reclaimed stone and somewhat hastily, quickly. Conclusions on the architectural morphology. We outline some key points that render our monument entirely distinct from the traditional church architecture of Andros. In the construction of the edifice, significant emphasis was placed on the dimension of height. This is unusual in the traditional architecture of the Cyclades concerning Orthodox churches. The unexpected absence of cornerstones strongly suggests either limited familiarity with local building traditions or adaptation to specific material constraints. Here we have two typical early modern Andriot churches. Here a basilica with two altars, probably one Catholic, one Orthodox, and with a flat roof. And here a small chapel with a corbelled roof. The form of the eastern section of the monument, with its elongated vaulted space west of the altar, bears notable resemblance to the Catholic Cathedral of St. Andrew in Kato Castro, the nowadays Hora, the island's capital, as well as to the Church of Faneromen in Pano Castro, in the southern part of the island. Here we can see that the apse the arc of the sanctuary, the apse, is equal to the width of the nave. The whole nave ends to an arc. The massive walls of the church may be justified if we accept that the original roofing consisted of a stone-built vault and a cross vault here, or even a dome. From the above, we conclude the architectural morphology of the Panagia Church might associate it with the Latin community of Andros. I repeat that the present vaulting system is more recent. It's probably after 16th century. Some nearby agricultural remnants, notably stone structures, κελιά, and threshing floors, here you can see all threshing floors, suggest a possible connection between them and the Church of Panagia. Could indeed the church have functioned as the worship center for a localized Catholic community, either of lay people or monks? Just two words about Frankish domination in Andros that resulted in the creation of the Latin Church. The island was seized in 1207 by Marino Dandolo on behalf of Venice until 1537, when the island was surrendered to the Ottoman fleet under Barbarossa. Andros formed part of the Duchy of the Archipelago, with its seat in Naxos. The Venetian Somaripa family were the last Frankish rulers of Andros. We will now turn to examine whether additional evidence exists in other sources regarding the identity of the enigmatic Panagia του Γάλλου. So, some archival sources. Our first source originates from the insularium of the French Franciscan André Thévet, 1516-1592, a geographer, I think it's 92, correct, anyway, a geographer in the service of Francis I of France. Thévet traveled through the Aegean between 1549 and 1554. The only church depicted on the map is one labeled Saint Cyril, located northwest of Gavrio, the island's safest harbor and adjacent to a stream. Here we can see a stream, a bridge, and the church. It is depicted as a cruciform basilica with two intersecting naves. You can see the two naves. And a lower western section here. Surrounding are visible some scattered structures here, some houses, etc. The accuracy of André Thévet topographical references concerning Andros, such as bridges and castle, has been confirmed. The fact that he does not mention the Catholic monastery at Menite, central Andros, near the Frankish capital, Katokastro. So the absence of any mention of that monastery suggests that the French geographer visited Saint Cyril in person. It is clear that this cruciform basilica bears a striking resemblance to Panagia του Γάλλου, here, with the exception of the western section, which, as previously noted, almost certainly existed but has since been demolished. So here is the western section, eastern section, western section. Our second source stems from the toponymy of the areas preserved in oral tradition and notarial documents. The present excerpt here comes from a notarial deed dated 1984, referencing a small agricultural plot located in the area called Hamotura or Maronitis, situated a short distance west of the Panagia του Γάλλου. You can also see here a 1977 topographic map mentioning the same two toponyms, Incidentally, the notarial act presented here involves a piece of land left to the speaker, I mean to me, by his father, Stamatios Vitaliotis. Research into this topic led to the present study. Returning to the two toponyms, Maronitis and Hamotura, we notice that they bear absolutely no relation to the name places in the Gavrio region of Andros. In fact, all the toponyms in that part of the island are of Greek, Venetian, or Albanian origin, or in some cases a hybrid of these. For example, Kaliveza, half Greek, half Albanian. The Albanian toponyms stem from 15th century Albanian Orthodox settlers in the north part of the islands, commonly referred to as Arvanites. The word Hamotura is evidently a corruption of the Aramaic word Hamatura, a toponym known in Lebanon meaning mountains heat, or more accurately and more logically, mountains hot spring. The unusual toponym combined with the second alternative name Maronitis drew our attention to this large Christian community in Lebanon, the Maronites, that had officially joined the Latin Church in 1213 under Pope Innocent III. So, were there any Maronites on the islands of Andros? If the Panagia του Γάλλου was indeed linked to a small Maronite community settled in Gavrios, then inhabited or sparsely inhabited natural harbor, uninhabited or sparsely inhabited, natural harbor. So the terminus post verbum for this installation, for the appearance of this community on the island, would be the year 1291, the year that Mamluks captured Acre, the last Latin stronghold in Palestine. It should be recalled that the Maronites, who were skilled archers, were close allies of the Crusaders. We know of Maronite settlements in Cyprus and Rhodes, where they followed the Hospitallers, and our colleague Geli Katsioti told me about probable presence of Syria Christians in Tilos Island. They also had stopovers in Handax, Crete. For the Cyclades Islands, there is no evidence of Maronite presence, though neither is there any counter-indication. The designation of the Church of St. Cyril on André TV map of Andros appears to support our hypothesis. This dedication is uncommon for both Byzantine Orthodox and Latin churches, but not for Oriental Christians. Here we may recall both Cyril of Alexandria, who is greatly honored by Oriental Christians, Copts, etc., and the diacon and martyr Cyril of Heliopolis, modern-day Baalbek in Lebanon, two saints particularly venerated among Oriental Christians. So the Maronites were monothelites. They used to believe in the existence of only one will of Christ, so they belonged to the big family of anti-Chalcedonian or Oriental Christians before their association with Rome. If our hypothesis holds, the rededication of the Church of St. Cyril to the Virgin Mary, to Panagia, upon its transfer to Orthodox hands, sometime after late 16th century, conforms to a common practice for which specific parallels are attested on Andros. We have several examples of rededication of Catholic churches after their transfer to the Orthodox on the island. The hitherto overlooked medieval church of the Panagia του Γάλλου offers a compelling case study in how morphological analysis of a monument combined with historical topography and toponymic analysis can reveal traces of a distant past events for which written sources are either lost or silent. I thank you a lot for your attention. Mnogo vi blagodaria.
Thank you, Mr. Vasilopoulos and Vitaliotis, for this interesting contribution. And we are proceeding with Mrs. Era Bousi from the National Institute of Cultural Heritage of Albania. She's going to talk us about the Chapel of the Holy Virgin, Golomboj, Prespa Lake.
Thank you. I want to thank the organizers for the approval of this presentation and for my presence here. It's an honor. In fact, in 2014, we've published a preliminary report and made some assessment on the murals of this monument, together with my two colleagues, Enkeleta Nestori and Zamir Marika, both of them two senior restorers from National Institute of Cultural Heritage, one of them member of the art department, and Zamir, which now is retired, but is an alive source of information, and together with the professors of our institution, still gives us their assistance in our daily work. So we published this preliminary report, and the purpose was twofold. First, to produce some primary documentation and on this monument, photographic and graphic documentation, and the second one to bring it to the focus of the authorities and of local community and increase their awareness on the importance of this monument in particular, which is a valuable documentary evidence, and on monuments generally. In fact, this is a map of Byzantine monuments in the territory of Albania, and the typological, architectural typology represented during this period. And on the other side is a map of the monument located in Prespa Lake. And this small church, which is dedicated to the Annunciation of the Virgin in the village of Golomboj, enriches the series of fresco paintings decorating the humble chapels and hermitages which are scattered on the shores of Prespa Lake. In fact, it is located in the center of the village, in a distance circa 105 meters from the lake. Nowadays, the monument is easily accessible due to the water withdrawals to the north and its location along the main road of the village. And the church today serves to the liturgical needs of local community. The building is subjected to many transformations throughout its lifespan. The oldest part of the structure has been adapted as an altar space, and along its western side is attached a modern building which constitutes the nave of the edifice today. However, in its original form, the church was a barrel-vaulted single-nave basilica with very modest dimensions, 4.8 and 3.3 meters. In the east, it ends with semicircular apse. The masonry of the church reveals its constructions with loose stones and bricks bounded with mortar, and the burial vault is made of sandstone. Typologically, the church is similar to other churches in the region, such as Maligrad, which is the most geographically the monument which is close to the Church of Golombot. The decoration of the church reveals two different faces. Both faces are clearly visible and distinguishable inside the monument. A poorly preserved inscription beside the niche of protheses and the image of St. Stephen, with colors almost completely faded, with only its contours still visible, clearly belonging to the first layer of painting, does not provide any information on the date of the execution and the names of donors or painters. Another partially preserved dedicatory inscription located in the interior of the monument above the western entrance of the church provides us more information on the second phase. The inscription was documented and published by Theophan Popa and indicates that the church was painted in July 20, 1873, with the contribution of Naum Christo and painted by a certain painter Apostol. Unfortunately, the actual state of preservation of the frescoes is poor due to atmospheric conditions, structural problems, and human activity. And when we mention human activity, we also include the working process of the painter of the second phase. And all this caused the dislodging of the paint layers, further contributing to the physical and structural degradation of frescoes. The remaining fresco decoration of the first phase, which is the main focus of this presentation, is located in the eastern wall, apse and protheses, and the northern wall of the naos. Here. The Virgin is depicted in the apse, and in both sides of the apse is depicted the Annunciation. In a lower register, in the northern section of the eastern wall, probably a holy diacon and probably St. Stephen occupies the apsidial of the protheses, and next to it is represented St. Simeon Stylites. The upper extremity of the eastern wall, the tympanum, is occupied by the Ascension combined with the Mandilion in the center. In the northern wall are located the rest of the preserved depictions. The lower register depicts full-length portraits of saints, a vases, a royal vases, and an unidentified birded saint occupy the lower register. In the intermediate register, there are medallions with busts of saints, from which we can discern the images of Saints Iulita and Kyrikos. And the upper register and the burial vault bear paintings illustrating scenes from the Dodecaarton, from which are preserved only the Transfiguration, and the Crucifixion, and the mere bearers at the tomb. The painted decoration is adapted to architectural morphology and incorporates peculiarities traditionally found in a broader territory. Regarding the Virgin, Platitera in the apse is depicted on a bichromated background, dark blue and olive green, frontally and with her hands raised in prayer, with the abbreviation Meter Theou depicted on either side, from which only Meter is preserved, and the rest of the painting has collapsed. The Virgin follows the general iconographic type of Platitera, as we see in the numerous depictions of the image during Paleologan period on monuments of the wider area. This usual type responds also to the Church of St. Athanasius Mouzaki in Kastoria and Church of Christ Theodotis Mborie. And analogous examples are noted also on monuments in the region of Prespa. The depiction of St. Simeon Stylites in the narrow wall surface between the apse and the niche of Prothesis can also find parallels in the monument of St. Athanasius Mouzaki and the cave church of Archangels in Trestenik. The insertion of the mandilion in the ascension, the placement of vases on the northern wall is also a common feature for 14th and 15th century churches in the region. We can find the vases placed in northern wall in the church of Tsersk near Leskovik and St. Athanasius of Kastoria, to name a few. Also, the pure preservation of painting is conditioning, even preventing us from making detailed comparisons. Certain similarities with churches in the wider area could provide some referential material. The images of saints are calm, with slender proportions, and have a gentle modeling of physiognomies. The delicate line, greenish shadows, and careful details, and the overall outcome generally suggests that this painting is the work of a mature artist. In some cases, the painter shows a pronounced taste for ornament, especially for details on clothes, such as we can see in the enthroned Christ and Virgin in the composition of vases. This implies that his work is inspired by paintings of St. Athanasius to Mouzaki and the paintings of Mborie. Also, the decoration of the cave church of Virgin Globoko and the painter which painted the facade and the full-length images of saints inside, associated by Bogevska Capuano with a painter trained in the workshop of St. Athanasius and Mborie, indicate a certain aesthetic closeness to the painting of the monument of Holy Virgin, of the Annunciation of the Virgin. That said, the attribution of the frescoes of Annunciation to the painter of the second phase of Globoko could be a hypothesis. The delineated similarities of architectural morphology and the shared iconographic and stylistic parallels with other monuments in the region, as attempted above, implies the dating of the edifice and the decoration of the Church of Annunciation to the late 14th century or the very beginning of 15th century. However, further investigation and intervention and conservation and restoration interventions in the monument could provide further data on the painted decoration of this monument, on the first layer of the painted decoration of this monument. Thank you.
Would you like to continue?
Okay, thank you very much. Now I will call for Alexander Vasilevsky and Katarina Rosikopoulos, Institute of Slavic Culture from Prilep, and with the paper Secondary Interventions on the Structure of the Church of St. Demetrius in Varosh, Prilep. Thank you.
Secondary interventions of the structure of the Church of St. Demetrius in Varosh, Prilep. The construction of the church dedicated to St. Demetrius in Varosh, near Prilep, is the result of multiple building phases, each aimed at adapting the sacred structure of the prevailing architectural trends of specific historical periods, while simultaneously addressing the functional needs of the local religious community. The architectural adaptations spanned a period of 8 centuries, beginning in the later half of the 12th century and continuing until 1970s. The current architectural form of the church is the product of restoration and reconstruction efforts carried out during the 1960s by the Republic Institute for the Protection of Cultural Monuments. The primary objective of these interventions was to restore as much of the 13th and 14th century architectural features and wall paintings as possible. In pursuit of recreating the perceived original form of the structure, extensions added during the Ottoman period were entirely removed and immediate surroundings of the building were also reconfigured. The only means of perceiving the architectural future of the church prior to the mid-12th century are historical photographs taken at the turn of the century alongside archaeological documentation and restoration records. These materials preserved in the Museum and Institute for Protection of Cultural Heritage in Prilep provide invaluable insights. The analysis of this archival data enables a comprehensive understanding of the church's historical and architectural evolution. The only the architectural and artistic phases of the church 12th to 14th centuries. The scholarly consensus maintains that the original structure of the church of San Demetrios in Varos was a modest single-aced building constructed with unhewn stone and covered with a gable roof. The edifice is generally dated to the final 2 decades of the 12th century based on the discovery of the 11th trachea of Manuel of First Komnenos in the central portions of the structure as well as preserved fresco fragments in the apse. The subsequent construction phase, broadly dated to the first half of 13th century, saw the addition of a porch with 3 arched openings in the north side along with the extensions of the apse to east. A few decades later, further extensive construction activities were undertaken, resulting in the incorporation of the porch into the primary core of the wailing and elevation of base, this creating a 2-aced layout. The original wooden ceilings were replaced with a semicircular volute, while the dome was substituted by a transverse volute, an architectural solution typical of the 13th century Epirus building traditions. The final phase of the construction, likely occurring in the early decades of the 14th century and associated with the patronage of Demetrios Myssinipolite, introduced significant conceptual changes of the church design. These interventions included the extension of the southern compartment, the addition of a spatial narthex of the west side, and the construction of the dome over the central portion of the naos. As a result of the exterior of the church assumed the visual form of a cross in square. The architectural modifications were followed by fresco decoration with the newly extended selections as well as the older paintings. The traces of the earliest painting phase were preserved in the lower zone of the central altar apse, where 2 processions of the officiating church fathers are depicted bowing to the gospel, which is centrally represented in the altar table in the apse's niche. The second phase of the frescoes corresponding to the architectural changes and the dome extensions, including depictions of the Virgin with the Christ and the San Demetrios in the pilasters flanking the altar apse. This phase also features a frontal depiction of Saint Ilia of the northeast pilaster, visually separated from the Virgins, but bust by a narrow band containing a fresco inscription with the names of Andronikos and Irene. The tutorial portrait of Myssinopolite, located in the southern compartment, is chronically close to this phase of fresco painting. Additionally, 2 other donor representations appear in the church. One depicts a monk showing the first zone of the southern volute beneath the dome in prayer to the hermit San Onufrius. The other donor representation, located on the east wall of the narthex next to the passage leading to the southern compartment, has been heavily damaged, prevailing detailed iconographic and stylistic analysis. The final phase of the painting in the church before the Ottoman conquest dates from the 1380 and 1395 and is attributed to the workshop of Metropolitan John the Zograph. Subsequent architectural interventions in the church. The present-day sacred object offers only a partial understanding of the stratigraphy of his medieval extensions. However, the travel writers who visited the church during the late 19th and early 20th centuries were unable to fully discern its architectural future. For instance, Archimandrit Antonin Kapustin, in his travel vague documenting his visit to Prilep, briefly mentions to the church San Demetrios, taking notice of its isolated position with a distinctive square set apart from the surrounding houses. He remarks that the church exhibits certain architectural qualities, including a dome in the Byzantine style. Several decades later, Serbian diplomat Jovan Hadživasiljević visited Varoš and, influenced by Kapustin's account, erroneously concluded that the church lacked architectural beauty. Hadživasiljević, however, provides a more detailed description, noting that the church was surrounded by graves and recording the extensions of the porch, along with the newer layers of the mortar and lime applied to the interior. The architectural modifications noted by Hadživasiljević are also documented in a photographs records taken by German soldiers stationed in Prilep in 1916-17. These photographs indicate that between the 15th and mid-19th century, the church underwent significant extensions and alterations, which impact both its visual and functional characteristic. Specifically, the north side of the church was expanded with additional patio compartment that extended along the full length of the building. Access to the new space was provided with a narrow, arched entrance of the west side, illuminated by three narrow lanterns on the east and two on the west. The west side was outfilled with an open porch that extended the full length of the church. However, due to uneven elevation, it was constructed in two levels. The structure supports of the porch was composed of wooden columns and interconnected by broad arcs, with the overhaul construction consisting of wooden beams and planks coated with the lime and mortar. These extensions also necessitated modifications to the church's roof structure, especially the newly added northern section was covered by a complex roof structure that extended from the church's transverse vault, thereby cleaning the upper portion of the northern facade. The western sections of the structure along the open porch started unfied roofing system that spanned the entire width of the church. Minor alterations was also made of the southern roof, while the original design was modified in the addition of a vaulted elevation of the southeast corner. Additionally, the central dome was elevated with multiple rows of bricks coated with mortar. Although there were no written records detailing the chronologically or purpose of the church's architectural extensions, it appears that the necropolis, which is extended around the church from the 17th to the 19th century, played a significant role in their development. The church's location within the economic center of medieval Prilep accounts for the absence of burial from earlier periods. The development of the necropolis surrounding the church is directly consequence of the political and social changes that ensued following the Ottoman conquest of Prilep. With the incorporation of Kings Marko territories into Ottoman rule in 1395, both of the fortresses and the surrounding Serbia lost prominence they had led in previous centuries. The permanent establishment of Ottoman administrative and military garrisons marked the beginning of the modern development of the town of the plain of Prilep field. The fortress continued to function without reduced garrison, while the former suburb Varosh gradually took on the characteristic of a rural settlement. From the 16th century until the mid-20th century, when it formally merged into the town of Prilep, it had already assumed the administrative function of a village. The decline of the urban character of the changing socio-economic conditions contributed to the transformation of the church San Demetrios into a funerary church, fulfilling the primary rule of post-Byzantine churches in Macedonia. The funerary rule of the church raised the need for the new architectural interventions that would serve the funerary rites. Thus, the section added on the north side was undoubtedly used as a dining room where the funeral feasts were held. The porch to the west was also utilized for the funerary rites associated with the necropolis. Research, interventions, and conservation of the church. The adaptations made to the church by the local population continued throughout the following decades. Between 1920s and 1960s, the southwest side of the church was extended with a bell tower, continuing the line of the open porch. This is evident from the technical drawings held by the National Museum of Prilep, which document the monument's condition prior to the conservation efforts undertaken in 1969. Systematic archaeological excavations and conservation research were carried out of the church and its surrounding area between 1965 and 1969 in collaboration with the University of Maria Curie Skłodowska in Lublin, Poland. The first phase of the research uncovered the remains of earlier fresco decorations beneath the later layer of the lime and mortar. The archaeological excavations uncovered remains of houses, fragments of glazed ceramics, pits, and various objects, all of which were dated in the second half of the 12th century. The area to the north, west, and south of the church, as well as the interior of its later asils, revealed 55 burials spanning several cultural horizons with dates running from the 16th century to the first half of 20th century. The architectural interventions resulted in the complete removal of the northern extension of the church, as well as the western porch and bell tower. The roof structure was also altered, while the original architectural elements of the church were superstructure, namely the dome, the transversal volute, and the upper segments of the facade well emphasized. The reconstruction of the narthex interacted in a new design solution for the upper section of the walls, which were reinforced with regular stone blocks alternate with bricks. The interior of the church underwent the complete removal of the secondary layer of mortar, which is filled with star-shaped ornamental motifs and documented in archival records. The artistic characteristic in 19th century wall paintings are primarily reflected in the equestrian depiction of San Demetrios slaying Kaloyan, located in Patron's niche above the west entrance of the church. Unfortunately, a complete photograph of this fresco could not be found, but an analysis of the preserved photograph documentation allows us to conclude that the painting, characterized by modest artistic qualities, was the work of local workshop from the 19th century. Each successive phase of the construction at the Church of San Demetrios Varosh serves as a significant source for understanding the historical, social, and cultural context of Prilep during the various time periods. While the medieval phases of the church are characterized by the eclecticism of various architectural and artistic trends with the Byzantine culture sphere during the 13th and 14th centuries, the later architectural extensions lack distinct aesthetic value. However, these extensions testify to the influence of the socio-economic conditions on sacral architecture. In accordance with the widely accepted principles of heritage preservation during that period, experts from the Republic Institute for the Protection of Cultural Monuments fully removed these later phases, thereby exposing aesthetic characteristic of the late 14th century structure. As a part of the efforts to the present site, the location of former necropolis has been embellished with stonework from the ancient period, excavated in the Varosh area. The omission of these phases from the church presentations has to this day constrained both visitors and research in fully understanding this critical chapter of the building's development. This approach has significantly influenced the focus of scholarly research, which has exclusively concerned on the architectural solution and frescoes from the medieval period, while largely omitting reference to the later phases of the structure. Thank you, Fretesh.
Thank you very much. And now we have Konstantinos Giacoumis, University College Logos from Tirana, with the paper approximating the value of church construction works during the second half of the 18th century, evidence from the Epirus and Western Macedonia regions.
Thank you. Well, yesterday and today we had the privilege to listen to or to look into a number of sources that provided some numerical data. This morning, for example, Ivanka Gergova presented a number of data of this sort. So, in this paper, I'm trying to combine archival evidence and evidence from expeditions to cast some light to a rather inadequately studied aspect of church construction activity, the value of church construction works during the second half of the 18th century in the regions of Epirus, Western Macedonia, South Albania, and also present a methodology of how we can approximate them, because the perception of value at the time is totally different to the perception that we have today. So for the study of the topic, I draw on archival data regarding the cost of church construction works for the erection of the Catholicon of the monastery of St. Peter and Paul at Vithkuki, southeast Albania. You can see that in the photo. From the ground up renovation of the parish churches of the Archangels and of the Pantokrator, really celebrating in the transfiguration in the city of Kyrokastra, South Albania, as well as the Catholicon of the monastery of St. Basil in the village of the same name in the area of Saranda, the coastal area. I approached the cost of works through an analysis of the architectural data of the monuments and by comparing the cost with the value of other movable or immovable properties, thus depicting an order of magnitude. I placed that as a starting point. Yes, this is an inscription of painter Panagiotis from Ioannina, from the narthex of the monastery of St. George at Pheneos, near Corinth. And what is interesting is the mentioning in the inscription of the funds that were devoted. So, for example, here somebody can see Grosia, Krous, 1334. Okay, and he also, let's say, mentions the cost of the re-erection of the church, and also of the painting of the church and the gilding of its iconostasis. Yet, however, these, make little sense to us. Yes, and this one of the deficits that art historians of the the Orthodoxists have compared to art historians in the West is that we lack, or we have not yet taken advantage of archives to really determine, was this expensive? Was, let's say, a painter, somebody who exercised an activity that was only for the few, a luxurious activity, or it was something, let's say, next to, a simple profession. The same goes for masons, for architects. So the approach of a topic of this sort, not only easy, it's not easy at all. First, because the mechanisms of perceiving the cost are different in the 18th century or 19th century than our points of reference today. Second, because for the most part we are lacking archival sources. Third, whenever we do have archival sources, rarely they become an object of study by art historians or architectural historians, because the difficulties in approaching sources of the sort require interdisciplinary collaboration with historians of, economic historians, whose interest, let's say, is more often than not focusing on other areas than art historical or architectural matters. Hence, many aspects of church construction activities and their costs remain hidden to date, unobvious. So I'm trying to suggest a methodology by which we can start filling this lacuna, hoping that, with the multiplication of examples from other regions of the Balkans, we can start recreating, some of the standards of these professions, of the painter and of the architect. It should be noted here that curiosity with regards to the cost of construction works already exists in the 19th century. For example, Johann Georg Beck, in his book The Art of Building in Ancient and Modern Times, Volume 1, mentions that the cost of construction of Hagia Sophia, St. Sophia in Constantinople, has been calculated to more than $5 million, but these are prices quoted in 1856, yes, which make little sense now. And in the narration, the Anonymous' narration with regards to the construction of the Church of St. Sophia, its cost is quoted as 3,200 centenars. 26,000 solidi, according to Agnellus, was the cost of Santa Vitale in Ravenna. And a document from the monastery of Iviron, dating 1421, records the works that were made in an orchard of the monastery in Thessaloniki. And there were three masons, three architects taking, that undertook the commission: Andreas Kambamaris, Argyros Xyphilinos, and Georgios Monomachos, who made a number of repairs, and they also built a spring together, let's say, with all of its parts. In this document, Andreas records that in order for the spring to, to operate, he had to employ 110 unskilled laborers with 24 skilled laborers at a cost of 24 kurus of the time, aspres. So the remaining workers, it was referred that when they enlarged another fountain and 7 water channels, repairing 5 and adding 2 new ones, in 1416-17, they employed 14 trowers, 20 workers, 7 buckets of plaster, 3 buckets of either prosthetes or seashells, and 1 bottle of linseed oil worth 2 aspres, 2 kurus, at a total cost of 20 aspres, 20 kurus. The document is rare because of the information it provides about the size of the workforce, the materials necessary, and the costs. It also distinguishes among the roles assigned to ikodomi, to masons, to skilled laborers, and also other ergate, other laborers, respectively. Such documents and also synthetic work, studying them, are quite rare when it comes to the monuments of the Ottoman period, the post-Byzantine period, both referring to the capital center as well as in the countryside, in the provinces, although there are many more archival sources of that period than in the previous periods. With regards to Ottoman monuments, we have, for example, the logistical data that were kept in the course of the 1489-1490 construction of the complex of the conquerors' mosques in Istanbul, in Constantinople. And we know that the Sultan spent lavishly on their great mosques, which represented great feats of organization. Domenico credited Suleiman with having spent 2.5 million gold pieces on the construction of the Suleimaniye. In our region, in the region of our focus, a related question was initially raised by William Bowden in his article Church Builders and Church Building in Late Antiquity Epirus, which was published in a volume edited by himself and Lavan, Recent Research in Late Antiquity Urbanism. And in that he made reference to the relatively low cost, as he calculated, of mosaic construction. Mosaics were a rather cheaper option, he argued. Although Diocletian's price edict is somewhat earlier, it names the ongoing rate of mosaicists at between 50 and 60 denarii per day, comparable with compensation of ordinary masons and carpenters, who got also the same, 50, but below that of ordinary wall painters, wall painters would earn, that is 75, and far below the earnings of figure painters, who received 150 denarii per day. Donations recorded in Christian mosaics elsewhere in Greece also suggest that the cost involved was relatively low. I recorded here a number of expenses that were recorded in various sources, and the sources are, I will project them afterwards. They come from the Metropolitan, the Diocesan Codex of the Diocese of Trinoupolis in Kyrokastra in Albania, as well as some of the archival sources published for the Metropolis of Kastoria. And there we can see, the cost of construction. As I mentioned, this mentions, this is nonsense to us. We cannot really rationalize that. Okay, it refers to the monastery of St. Peter, St. Paul, and here is the extent of the monastery, but the expenses really refer to the Catholicon, to the main church of the monastery. And these, the sections, these are now the published sources with regards to its construction. So, for example, it says in the year 1761, the iconostasis was built and carved entirely with expenses of the Moscopolitans, who were active in trading relations with Lechia in Poland, whose quantity is 600 kurus. We also have a few evidence from the monastery of St. Basil at the homonym village, St. Vasil, at the coastline of. So here there is a commemoration note that is written in as a brief chronicle in a Mineon that was found later at the monastery of Kamina, another monastery, but it was apparently taken from somebody who was at St. Vasil, at the village before, and transferred. He then moved to the monastery of Kamina, and it reads that in the year 1753, on November the 1st, we brought in the builders and constructed the church of St. Basil. Likewise, we also built a cistern and the enclosure, the courtyard of the monastery, with an agreement of 3,000 aspres, kurus. And the total expenses with the oil for the cistern, the reservoir, the planks, and the cross that we made came to 10,000 kurus, exceeding beyond, the bread and food for the masters that was provided pro bono. We also have evidence from the two churches in the city of Kyrokastra, the Church of the Transfiguration at the Old Bazaar of Kyrokastra, 1776, and Yes, and here is an account of the expenses as is to be found in the codex of the city. And likewise, the Church of the Holy Taxiarchs in 1776, again with an account of the expenses. This is, I think, let's say, what is here. We look into the cost of construction and the method by which we should approximate that, because there is no acceptable method by which we can convert the quantities of the time to modern currency. And even if we do that, what's the relevance of that 10 years or 20 years from now? Okay. So what historians and art historians should be looking at is the prices of other commodities at around the same period of time, and also at the vicinity, because prices at the time fluctuated regionally. So there was no central bank that fixed the value of currency. So basically here, okay, looking into the ground plans and the cost of construction, I measured the cost on a meter square. Yes, it should really, yes, meter square. I measured the surface rather than volume. And this one here, at the bottom right, let's say, section, there are some comparable data. So 50 kurus, that is 6,000 akse, for a silver cover of an icon's halo in 1795. Or, closer to, to these dates, 110,000 akse for a house sold in Gyrocaster. Okay, so basically, yes, a total of 500 akse here for the entire church would be, let's say, the equivalent of 5 houses in the yes. This is basically, what I wanted to present. There are many examples that somebody could bring, but I thought that for the purpose of illustrating the method rather than, the very data, I would suffice myself into these. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we have a last presentation in this session, Alexandra Michalska, independent researcher from Poland, with the title Missing Icons from the Iconostasis of St. George's Church in Zlatolist. What do the archives say?
Thank you. First of all, thank you the organizers for inviting me for this conference again, and I would like to mention from the 1st of April I am again representing University of Adam Mickiewicz in Poznań, and I would like to thank at the beginning as well for all of the advices I got from Professor Ivanka Gergova during my field work. I realized in 2021, preparing for my dissertation. I will read my abstract in English, and forgive me to go into the Bulgarian version of my text. I decided it will be maybe better to read it in Bulgarian, because I would like also to get some maybe advices from other Bulgarian scientists according to my topics, and I will be thankful to all of you searching the answers to this subject. So the Church of St. George in the village of Zlatolist, Bulgaria, is a fascinating subject of research, not only for art historians, but also for cultural anthropologists and, as it turns out, archivists. Built in 1853 on the foundations of an older church, as evidenced by the small apse, it was declared a cultural monument of local significance in 1975. The documents in the archive of the National Institute of Immovable Cultural Heritage in Sofia contain 5 folders, 3 of which primarily include architectural plans of the church, while the other 2 provide descriptions of the building, its inventory, and its historical significance. Archival data from 1975 and 1980 significantly contribute to our understanding of the iconostasis, particularly the icons from the sovereign tire and the now missing icons from the feasts tire. Records of the sovereign tire icons reveal that at the time of the communication, the icons recorded only partially matched the church's current state. Additionally, during the first investigations, 21 icons were documented in the feasts tire, whereas by 1980, only 17 remained. Today, the entire tire consists of printed reproductions. What happened to the missing icons? When might they have disappeared, and where might they be now? The archival data provides some clues, but these questions remain open for further investigation. Иконите, запазени в важните центрове на региона, където се намира църквата, от която се интересувам, Мелни Гроженски манастир, и в околните села, са сравнително слабо проучени. Условията за проучване и систематизиране са били затруднени от големите разрушения от османското нашествие през 14 век, както и по-късно от Балканските войни. През 80-те години на 20 век такава документация е направила Лозинка Койнова Арнаудова. Изследователката е направила документация на над 1500 икони от десетки църкви, и тя разделя произведенията на 3 групи. Средновековен период и началото на османското владичество, период на османско робство и национално възраждане по време национално възраждане. По време на османското владичество Атон със своите манастири концентрира културния религиозния живот на поданиците на страните от Балканския полуостров. Зоографите идват от България, Гърция, Сърбия и възможно също така да имало тези, които са се върнали които са отишли от Мелник и са се върнали и под влияние на образование от остров. Това повлияло върху произведенията в региона. Но това е ясно за всичките изкуствоведи тук. За да науча повече за процеса на промени в украсата на храма Свети Георги в Златолист, събрах информация от архивите на Националния институт за недвижимо културно наследство в София. Документите, отнасящи се до църквата, са събрани в 5 папки, 3 от които са основно архитектурни планове на църквата, а 2 съдържат описание на сградата и нейния инвентар, както и становище за историческата й стойност. Оттам, както и от надпис върху източната външна стена на църквата, знаем, че е построена през 1853 година. Според Велда Марди Бабекова, църквата е изградена върху основа на късно средновековна сграда, за което свидетелствува източната част с малката апсида. От формуляра знаем също, че 1975 година е декларирана за паметник на културата от местно значение. През 1980 година Марияна Жекова прави по-точна справка за църквата с описанието на външен и вътрешен вид, включително и свободно стоящи икони, иконостаси, други. Друго оборудване. След проучване на Владимир Димитров вече няма съмнение, че авторите на стенописите в църквата са зоографи от рода Минови, активни в региона по време на Възраждането. И докато стенописите на църквата са вече разработени добре, иконите от иконостаса и свободно стоящите до сега са не са били научно изследвани. Те имат различна стилистика. Авторите са неизвестни, творбите вероятно датират от 18-19 век и може да се предположи, че някои от тях са украсявали по-стара църква, по-малка и първоначално разположена на същото място. Самия иконостас е с проста конструкция, без сложната украса и богата дърворезба, характерни за времето на Възраждането в България. Наивният стил на флоралната украса в долната и горната част на иконостаса контрастира с учената, макар и рустикална техника, която се наблюдава в иконите от царския ред. Заслужава се да се отбележи, че различията в детайлите показват заслужава да се отбележи, че различията в детайлите показват, че те са изпълнени от няколко автори. В тях се забелязват и следи от нанасяни промени и последователни слоеве боя, особено около лицата на светците, което допринася за трудностите да се определи точно стила на регионалната школа, която може би представляват. Върху някой от тях се забелязва и смяна на надписите от гръцки на кирилица. Иконата на Свети Георги, покровител на църквата, изглежда най-прецизно детайлизирана, въпреки че състоянието й също се нуждае от реставрация. Иконите непосредствено до царските двери и Христос Пантократор и Свети Йоан Крестител вероятно са от един и същ автор и в документацията са определени като нови. Интересно откритие е иконата на Свети Атанаси, последната вредицата вляво от Христос, не съответстваща по размери на нишата, която вероятно е заменила намиращата се преди това там икона на Богородично Успение, споменато в документацията от архива. Иконата на същия светец е спомената в публикуваната книга през 1980 година от изкуствоведката Лозинка Койнова Арнаудова, но тя е с размер 34 на 27 сантиметра. И от папката и документацията на архив регистъра на царските икони включва следните от ляво надясно. Свети Харалампи, който в момента го няма и представлява свободно стояща, значи, намираме в църквата свободно стояща икона на Свети Харалампи из житието, която ще покажа след малко. И тя се намира зад иконостаса в момента. След това са изброени Свети Николай, който виждаме тук, Свети Георги, Богородица с Младенеца, Христос Вседържител, Йоан Крестител и Успение Богородично, което в момента е заместено с Свети Атанаси, за което споменах преди малко. Каноничните икони от 19 век също са подредени в различни части на светилището, включително света неделя, света... извинявам се. Включително света неделя и света петка, свети Илия, Христос Пантократор и архивните данни от 1975 година и 1980 година внасят информация, допълваща знанието, особено за иконостаса и иконите, които сега липсват в празничния ред по време на първото проучване. Иконите са били 21, а през 1980 година вече са 17. Сред изброените от Марияна Жекова са Василий Велики, свети Йоан Златоуст, свети Григорий Велики, Успение Богородично, Григорий Велики, Възнесени Господне, Неверни Тома, Влизане в Иерусалим, Разпятие, Рожество Христово, Света Троица, Възкресение Христово, Благовещение, Сретение Господне, Тайната вечеря, Богородица Елеуса, Свети Спиридон, Свети Петър и Павел и Богородица от Егитрия. И това са единствените снимки, които се намират в архива и представляват иконите от празничния ред. И тук можем да забележим някой от изброените от мен икони преди малко. Лозинка Койнова Арналдова в албума с икони от Мелнишкия край представи тук също снимките с разпятието и влизането в Иерусалим. Разпятието се вижда и тук. И това са единствените от документацията. Както се вижда, репродукциите, някои от тях съответстват на тези, които виждаме на останалите снимки. От списъка на иконите, намиращи се в царския ред, става ясно, че от момента на извършване на проучването иконите само частично съответстват на тези, които се намират по-настоящем в църквата. Така иконите от царския ред не разполагаме с снимки, но съответстват на описаните в документите, както вече споменах, свети Никола, свети Георги и на снимката, която виждаме от архива, свети Георги е представен в иконата от вероятно предназначена за споменатия в документите проскинетарии. Тя се различава от тази, която е в иконостаса, и също така това, което е интересно в албума с иконите от Мелнишки край на Лозинка Койнова Арналдова, имаме детайл на кон от иконата на свети Георги, обаче както виждаме, главата на кон съответства на този, който е в иконата, предназначена за проскинетари и която в момента не се намира в църквата и не се знае къде можем да я потърсим. Така, останалите от икони от царски ред, както споменах, съответстват на тези от списъка, обаче не се знае дали и така от работата на мястото видяхме, че те са различни стилове, най-вероятно на различни автори. И сега, което е също така интересно, сред свободно стоящите икони намираме и Христос Пантократор на братята Минови, най-вероятно, и малката икона на Христос Пантократор, която е в центъра на църквата, и те не са споменати в документацията от 1980 година, както и от предишната документация, няма ги в списъците, но има иконата на Христос Пантократор, която е отбелязана като изключително ценна от архиерейския трон и най-вероятно произхожда от 18 век. И също така не се знае каква е съдбата ѝ. Иконата на Свети Харалампи, за който споменах вече, тя в момента се намира в олтарното пространство зад иконостаса. Тук се виждат и сцени от житието на Свети Харалампи. Тази икона, която виждаме на снимката от архива, не я намираме и в църквата, но намираме свободно стояща иконата на Света Неделя и Света Петка. Също така иконата, която съществува в списъка от архива и която е описана като Богородица с младенеца с размер 43 cm на 32 и се намира в албума на Лозинка Койнова-Арналдова, но не я намираме в църквата. Но тази икона на Свети Илия намираме я в списъка сред иконите от празничния ред и най-вероятно тя произхожда от иконостаса, защото и съответства с размерите. В момента се намира отстрани под стенописите на северната стена на църквата. Много интересно, че тази икона на Свети Никола съществува в списъка от документацията от 1980 година като Свети Спиридон с въпросителен и е описана, че на трон в резбована рамка пропукана и с нечетлив рисунък, отпаднал части от живописния слой в дясната част при надписа, така че точно съответства на опис от документацията. Иконата само, че представлява Свети Никола и тя се намира в момента в стаята на преподобна Стойна в църквата в Златолист, там където вярващите идват да се поклонят на неканоничната светица пророчица. И така, съдбата на липсващите икони в църквата, особено тези от празничния ред, които са били заменени с репродукции, е неизвестна. Според разказите на жителите, те са били откраднати през 80-те години на 20 век по време на комунистическото правителство, целящо да маргинализира ролята на религията. В интервюта с жители на селото и с духовници получих информация, че те са били давани на еноряшите да ги вземат вкъщи, за да ги предпазят от разграбване. Духовника, посочвайки иконата на Свети Атанасий в иконостаса, която не се вписва като размер в нишата и се различава от тази цитирана в албума за икони от Мелнишкия регион на Койнова Арнаудова, лансира идеята за възможния и произход от параклиса на Свети Атанасий, намиращ се в близост до църквата Свети Георги, и в контекста на изложените факти са за различния произход на иконите от царския ред. Тази версия е доста правдоподобна, макар че изисква допълнителни проучвания. Като заключение, тук още няколко снимки, представляващи иконите, репродукции от празничния ред и от иконостаса. И като заключение мога също така да... Това, което напоследък намерих като интересно на информация от личен архив на професор Красимир Станчев от 86-та година, тук в интервюто с един от жителите на селото, той казва: поп Христо бил айдук, откраднал икони от църквата, отсякал черешата в двора на църквата и затрупал бунара. Той е бил поп след поп Георги Костадинов и така нататък. Така че това би потвърждавало версията за иконите, които са били откраднати, въпреки че не знаем от кого, как, но можем да предположим, че времето и можем да предположим, че това е станало между 1980 година и 1986 година, когато вече ги нямало в църквата. Какво е станало с липсващите икони, къде се намират, как изчезнаха, дали вярваме на легендите, слухове. Тук това са отворени въпроси, които остават. Най-добре според мен би било да послушаме архивистите от 80-те години, да направим обстойно изкуствоведско проучване с теренна работа в региона, включваща интервюта с жители на областта, еноряши и свещениците. Аз питах и също и за липсващите икони, дали могат да се намерят в музеите, например в Роженския манастир, дали са били предназначени за реставриране в ателиета. Не се знае, остават много въпроси и ще съм благодарна, ако имате идеи къде можем и как можем да търсим отговори на тези въпроси. Благодаря много. Thank you so much for your attention.
Now we proceed. Thank you very much. We proceed with our discussion. And is there any question about the first paper about Panagia Galou? in Andros by Vitaliotis and Vasilopoulos. Yes, Mr. Yakumis.
Any other examples of conversion? So this is the first, and we are therefore here to look into this as a start point of researching.
Yes, a conversion of churches from Navros, from Catholic Orthodox
No, to Maronites.
to Maronite. No, I mean that this church was not converted into a Maronite church. It was built from the beginning as a Latin church, and probably it was built for a small Maronite community, and then it was converted to an Orthodox church. And in fact, in the capital of Andros, the capital of Andros, Chora, Katokastro, was created by the Venetians, the Franks. So the Byzantine Andros was in Messaria, in the interior. So almost all the churches in Chora that now are Orthodox, apart from St. Andrew, were formerly Catholic churches. And then they were converted to the Orthodox cults. So this was a Latin church, Panagiotou Galou, according to our hypothesis, and we are sure that it was a Latin church, probably for the Maronites, and then it became an Orthodox church after 16th century, when the Latins probably were compelled to leave the island.
So do we have any churches, Latin churches, that were built for the purpose of being used by Maronites in other?
No, it's the only example that we have. It's a hypothesis. So it's like a breakthrough hypothesis that there was also a community, at least one community of Maronites in the Cyclades. For the Dodecanese, we have some evidence, but not
yes.
for the Cyclades.
And according to this, I'd like to ask why perhaps it was a Maronite Orthodox from the beginning.
The Maronites were not Orthodox, the Maronites were Catholics. I mean, they were Catholics.
From the beginning?
In early 13th century, but probably from 12th century, but since early 13th century for sure, the Maronites were united with Rome, and the Maronites in Lebanon were close allies to the Crusaders till the end, till the fall of Acre. That's why they followed, many Maronites followed the Crusaders in their exodus towards the west, or even Rome. The other Christians, even either Jacobites or Byzantine Orthodox Melkites, were not allied to the Crusaders, so they were between the Crusaders and the Muslims. So they didn't follow the Crusaders to their
But according to the archivals from the Dodecanese, there were Orthodox Syrians who followed the Crusaders.
The problem is that that church, Panagia, could be Orthodox Syrian. The problem is that it's essentially a Latin church according to its morphology. So our first impression that it was a Latin church, and then with the discovery of the toponym Maronitis or Hamotura and the other and the indication Saint Cyril on the Saint Cyril is not used by the Byzantine Orthodox, even Syrians. It could be used by the Jacobite, but why Jacobites? Why would the Jacobites leave Syria? They were not allied to the Crusaders.
But Saint Cyril is not a popular, but we have from early Byzantine in the Dodecanese Churches, yes.
Saint Cyril as a name, but in the Cyclades, yes, it's
Είναι Κάλυμνος.
Do you still own the lands? Do you still own that land? You said it was your land.
No?
No?
This it's a very it's a very normal garden. I don't have to what to do with it. I mean,
But is there any warm well? Because you say the toponym is referring to
Yes.
some hot water.
yes, hot water. There is a spring of water, and it became found. It's a non-found. Probably it's contemporary to the church, just beside the church.
It's not on your land, because you could do a
No,
spa.
no. And what is interesting, I didn't have time to show it. On the old fountain, there used to be, I don't know where it is now, an inscription, second use, and mentioning Asclepios, and mentioning Roman fish, what's called piscina, Theotrophio, fishery, yes, fishery, a Roman fishery somewhere, and they put the inscription, they put it on the founded medieval period. It's not very fast in this
Is there a question from someone else?
To the next presentation.
To the next presentation. So we'll proceed with the next presentation of Eva Bushi, and I think that is a question already mentioned.
Mrs. Bushi, I would like to ask you something because I know the new church who was composed very well. And my opinion, I put this some fragments, is that the mural painting on the first land, the oil basics, has a stylistic features very similar to the frescoes in the Church of Anglis Grace in Castoria, and it's dated about the the beginning of the 15th century. 1414. What is your opinion about your last investigations? About this parallel with
we ended the presentation with data that the chronology about the 14th century and very beginning of and we linked the painter of the first layer is a painter of the full length, which painted the full length saints inside the pictures of the Golden Bulge and the facade in the upper layer, upper level of the pictures of the Golden Bulge. Yes. But the painter of the Annunciation is very, very open to the influences from Castoria, at least what we have until now. Because if we're writing up an implementation of the conservation and restoration intervention, we have the Western wall, and we know that we have a second layer beneath the 19th century layer, and 8th east. Further implementation of this project for the detachment of 19th century layer needs further discussion among experts in order to see and evaluate both phases of the monument and detach the 19th century layer to its core in order to conserve and to see what we had from the first phase.
Yes, thank you very much, because I was last time 20 years ago there, and there have been changes.
So for the next paper, by so Tan's mother, Alexander Vasilevsky, and Katerina Rosikopoulou, about the church in Prilep. Is there any question? Yes, Professor Paisidou.
Thank you very much. Congratulations for this communication. I would only I wanted to ask you concerning the third phase of the church, that is to say the comp of the diaconicon, if I'm not mistaken. This is attributed to the 14th century. It reminds me very much of St. George of Morphoclesia, out in outskirts of Castoria. I don't know if you read yes, this picture, yes. And it's very comparable to the despotates of Epirus, of the monuments of Epirus. Yes. I don't know, because you have all the information.
According to Sasho Kurnovsky's architecture, he says that it's analog with churches in Epirus. And the dome, these decorations, it's similar like decoration, the church here.
Yes. And also Morphoclesia Castoria, which is from the same period, 13th and 14th century. But the diaconicon is attributed to the 14th century or to the 13th century. The composite diaconicon is completely different from the other cones. It's the same circle. Yes.
It's another place.
It's another phase, but
yes. It is from the 13th or 14th century, according to your opinion.
I think it's 14.
14.
Because the first phase was 12, just the single nave, one church, single nave without dome, without prothesis and different.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions for Katerina? Okay, we can proceed to Giacomis. Okay, Constantin, very interesting question of value of church construction works and etc. Any questions or comments? Okay.
Of course, it's very interesting. This has been studied as well. Only one more of an observation. You should check the inflation rates between the prices, let's say, from 1759 and 1795, and maybe the 100,000 chairs from the middle of the 18th century have a greater value in 1795 or the opposite. I don't know how they do inflation, but I think you should also get this in account. In adjusting the prices.
I got, yes, adjusting the prices. These are hypotheses. I got data that are within a decade. The 70-50s was just, let's say, to indicate how we work. What they took most consideration is the purchase of this housing bureaucrata that has not been realized. But still, let's say,
the inflation can range in 2-3 years. This is known in the studies that they developing.
It also it could be equated to how cost a horse or a cow.
Yeah.
This is small scale.
Yeah. The point is to find the prices that are close in time.
And also in space, because sometimes you see that
Also yes. But of course, it's this could be formed into a database. You put all the data from several areas.
My preliminary conclusion is that indeed labor with regards to church construction and also painting and carving and gilding, let's say, that was relatively low.
I was amazed to see that mosaic was less painted than the painting. So, in fact, mosaic as an expensive art was because of the material, not because of the masters.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, and the last one was Alexandra Michalska, so any questions for her? Okay, we have
Thank you. I have no questions. Thank you to Mrs. Michalska. I just want to say some marks because you mentioned a few times about Luzinka coin, and you said the famous art historian. She's very famous, but she's very famous restorator. Due to her hard work, we have preserved many murals and icon paintings from the Middle East, antiquity, from all the periods, but she's a restorator. And just my observation, I'm a little bit far from the slides, but I did that on the slide with 3 icons with kind of the one black and white from archive, the icon in the center, which was not mentioned in the documents, according to my opinion, from this distance, is just really painted, and it is not exactly a copy, it is a new icon. It is
which one is in the center from the...
Yes, and maybe this is
there is a date written on the book of Jesus Christ. There is a date, it is like 1875.
Yes, but it is something like a copy.
I don't know, maybe it was repainted, but we saw it from, when we see it from the close, it doesn't seem to be.
Make a consultation with some art historian.
I did.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments and questions? Okay, thank to all presenters for today. It was very interesting. Thank you, and we can, I think, conclude this session and have a nice rest of the day.